Good morning. Today is June 22nd, 2005, and we're at the Warhawk Air Museum in Nampa, Idaho. Today we're going to interview Howard Barton as part of the Veterans History Project and in partnership with the Library of Congress. So Mr. Barton, if you would introduce yourself and tell us where and when you were born.
Well, I'm Howard Barton. I was born in Dodge City, Kansas, February 7th, 1931.
Good morning again, Mr. Barton. We appreciate your taking time to give us a rundown on your military experiences and the memorabilia that you brought. Leave plenty of opportunity to discuss your situation and what you went through while you were in Korea. Dodge City, Kansas, 1931. Did you go to school there too?
No, well, I went to school. We had moved to Arkansas City. I started school in Arkansas City, and then from Arkansas City, when I was about 8, we moved to Boise, and I went to school in Boise then from that point on. Grade school in Boise, and in a little community, well, it used to be a community called Barber that was east of Boise, several miles. And I was the only kid in my class in the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. That little country school.
One-room school, huh?
Yeah, that's pretty much what it was. And then from there I came into Boise High School, graduated from there, and then started school in Boise Junior College. And I was drafted in February of '52.
Okay.
During that Korean conflict.
Do you remember December 7th, 1941?
I remember December 7th. Yeah, I was just a kid then.
Well,
and
I know.
It was one of those things that really left an impression on me. In fact, it kind of scared me because I thought, good grief, are they going to be bombing us next? But of course that didn't happen, but it was a situation, you know, that really caught my attention at that time.
Any in your family enlist or go into the military in World War II?
I had several cousins who were in the military during World War II. Two of them in the Navy, and an uncle who was in the Army, and one in the Air Force that I can recall.
Yeah, so you had some pretty constant attention to the military and what was going on during World War II.
Yeah, I sort of had some history of what had happened, and then it was interesting to talk to them about their experiences during that time.
Yes. When did you graduate high school?
1950.
1950, all right. And you went to...
I started school at Boise Junior College.
How long before you were drafted? 2 years?
Year and a half.
Year and a half, okay.
Year and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you were drafted into the Army?
Drafted into the Army.
And where'd you go from there?
Well, what they did is they flew me to, Fort Lewis, Washington. And I was only there a short time, and then I went up on a train, actually. And then they flew me from there to Camp Roberts, California for basic training. And I don't think that they even use that camp anymore. But I took 16 weeks of what they call heavy infantry basic training, which meant that I would use, you know, larger caliber mortars, larger caliber machine guns, and like usually the light infantry would stop at a 60 millimeter mortar. We went up to an 81 millimeter mortar. They would stop at a 57 recoilless rifle. We went up to a 75 recoilless. And then on the machine guns, they'd usually stop at a light 30 caliber, but we used the 30 caliber water cool, plus we went up to a 50 caliber. So it was just we were using larger weapons than what the regular infantry unit light infantry unit was using. So I had that basic training. Excuse me. And from there they gave me a 30-day furlough, and I had asked for training as a paratrooper. So after that furlough, they sent me to Fort Benning, Georgia, and I can't recall exactly how long I was there, but I went through the basic, for the training for the paratroop.
Oh.
And after that, they gave me a short furlough, and then I was hoping, of course, that they were going to send me to Germany or someplace like that.
Yeah.
And instead, they sent me off to Japan.
It's interesting that you'd be in a heavy weapons and be a paratrooper. Would you jump with that equipment, or would they ship it?
Well,
push it out ahead of time, or what?
Well, most of that equipment would probably be pushed out, like you say, in preparation for our landing. But I never did take part in a combat, as a paratrooper. What happened, I'll have to explain this, is after I got to Japan, they sent me to Korea up on the front line, and I was supposed to be attached to the 187th Airborne. And when I got to the front line, they were just coming off the front line because they'd been up there in combat, and they said, well, we have combat experience, so you need to go up and spend a month on the front line so you can get combat experience, and then ask for a reassignment to the 187th. So I went up on the front line, and while I was there, I found out they had a rotation system where if you got 36 points, you could get out of Korea, get away from the front line, of course, and that was my major goal.
Yeah, of course.
And you got 4 points if you were on the front line or an outpost, and I spent quite a bit of time on some outposts. And 2 points if you were back where artillery could hit you, and 1 point if you were back so far it couldn't hit you, and of course that's where the 187th was, because they went back to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, gee whiz, I don't want to be over in this place forever. So I never did ask for reassignment back to the 187th. I stayed up on the front line. Well, I was with the 7th Division, 17th Infantry Regiment, and I think it was Company A, about the 3rd Platoon, I think, of Company A. But there was a time there when they pulled us off the front line, and we were to guard prisoners. And there was a prison break, and of the whole company called out to quell the riot, I was the only guy in that company that didn't wake up. So the next thing I know, I felt the presence of someone beside my cot, and I looked up, and here's my platoon leader of the outfit I was attached to, and he made me get up and get dressed, and then I had to walk around the company area carrying a machine gun and a full pack, and I was the guy who didn't get up and help quell the riot. So that was my punishment. And I thought, well, I'm not too fond of this. So I went down to medical company and said, what's it take to transfer into the medics? The guy said, get a letter from your company commander and bring it back down. So I went up and saw my company commander, got the letter, took it back to medical company, and they accepted me. I spent a week with the medical company. One morning on being shown how to apply pressure bandages and give shots of morphine with a little dinky syringe that they had. And they reassigned me right back to the same company I'd come out of, same platoon I'd come out of, but now instead of, this is the guy that didn't quell the riot, if you get shot now, you call this guy.
Yeah.
So I turned sort of from a black sheep to a good guy all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I got into the medics.
Okay.
You know, it was a strange situation to have heavy weapons basic training, paratroop training, and then all of a sudden become a medic.
Yeah. Did you have any medical training at all at Boise Junior College or anything?
I had taken a course in physiology and anatomy, but that was the extent of it.
Okay.
So as far as, the training that normal medics received, I was really far short of what they received. But
mm-hmm.
I ended up, as a medic, patching up a lot of guys. So apparently I did the job all right.
Mm-hmm. Lots of questions. When you were, you signed up for outpost duty.
Well, we didn't actually sign up. They took the assignments of the company. They would assign certain platoons to different outposts.
Okay.
And a couple of the first outposts I was on was, they called it Arsenal and Erie. And the general area that I was in Korea, you know, was,
Here's a pointer here.
yeah, kind of up, just sort of in the middle part of Korea, on the front line. As you know, the 38th parallel was supposed to be the dividing point. It's the Chorwan Valley. That's the general area that I was in. A couple outposts. One of them was called Arsenal. One of them was called Erie. And so I was out on those outposts for some time. And
How far in advance of the main units was an outpost?
well, those particular outposts were probably a half mile
Oh, really?
out in front of the front line.
But you had secure passage back to the lines?
Well, what they did is they took us out in armored personnel carriers out to the outposts. And then once we were out there, of course, there was all this trench set up and bunkers that people had prepared long in advance
Mm-hmm.
because they'd been there for some time.
What armament did you have with you? Did you have 50 caliber machine guns? Heavy armament?
Well, you know, when I became a medic, I wasn't really carrying anything. I did, for some reason, I carried a couple hand grenades, thinking, well, if I really need these, I'll use them. Another interesting thing is when I became a medic, you know, during World War II, they wore those red crosses. But when over in Korea, they said, you take those off because the Chinese are using those for targets. So I never did wear red crosses when I was in Korea. I did scratch a little emblem on the side of my helmet just in case some guy didn't know for sure what I was.
Mm-hmm.
As far as, you know, a medic, I guess he could tell by, we did have a what they call a large aid bag that was just kind of a canvas bag that had all your bandages and medicine in it.
Mm-hmm. But when you were in the outpost, were you a medic or were you?
I was a medic.
Oh,
yeah.
In every case, huh?
In every case,
okay.
I was a
All right.
medic.
And how long? What was the armament of the guys that were guarding?
Oh, okay. Most of that was light infantry.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So all that heavy weapons basic training that I had taken didn't mean too much, except one time they brought up a 50 caliber machine gun in those big wooden boxes, all covered with cosmoline. You guys probably know what that is, but
Mm-hmm.
and there wasn't anyone there who could put that thing together, so they had to come and see the medic, and I had to put it together for them,
Mm-hmm.
dig it out of there and clean it up and put it together, because that's the kind of training I had,
Yeah.
where the rest of them were light infantry.
How many men would be at an outpost at one time?
Well, on that particular outpost, I think we had a platoon on Arsenal, and it was connected to Erie by a trench that was probably 100 yards long. And I think there was a platoon on that outpost, so there'd probably be about 30 or 40 guys on each
really?
one of those outposts.
And they had sleeping conditions and set up there?
Well, they had bunkers, what it amounted to, sandbag bunkers,
Mm-hmm.
you know, filled with, all they were bags filled with dirt and then just built up to a certain height. And
How long would you
planked
stay out
over.
there?
Pardon?
How long would you stay out there?
I think the first time that I was out on Arsenal or Erie was probably about a month. And then they pulled us off, put us on the front line for a short time. And then they had a little outpost. Well, I should back up a minute. While I was on Arsenal, one morning it was very foggy, and so one of the other guys and I got the bright idea, well, why don't we sneak out the entry and of one of the bunkers and go out in front of the outpost and see what's out there. Actually, when you think about it, that wasn't too bright of an idea because there's mines out there and you don't know what else is going to be out there. And while I was out there, I found this horn. I found this, what it is supposed to be a kind of a stamp of one of the commanders of a Chinese outfit that had attacked that particular outpost, and there were probably 15 or 20 dead Chinese still out there. And they, in the process, they had carried up all kinds of propaganda with them. Mm-hmm. And of course, I picked up a little sack and I had the propaganda in it and had these two items in it, plus these little medals there. And basically what they wanted us to do was read that stuff and then go over to their side and ask for asylum. Mm-hmm. But when I came off of that outpost, like I say, then they put us on the front line for a short time. And then there was another little outpost called Snook, which was probably a quarter of a mile down a ridge from the front line. Very small outpost. I bet you there was only about 15 of us on that little outpost.
Did all the medics, all the outposts have medics?
I think they did.
Okay. And how did you communicate from one outpost to the other? Through the trench, or did you have radios?
We had radios when we were out on Arsenal and area. That was basic communication system. If you, you would think, well, what in the world? Because in a lot of those trenches, what they did is they strung what they call a commo wire, which is nothing but just a real thin piece of what you'd think was telephone wire. Probably something a little thicker than this wire here. There's miles of that stuff just strung out there from one time to another. As guys went out to an outpost, they'd drag that with them, and that was their communication system. Mm-hmm. And then the next guys that went down, they'd drag another line. You'd think, well, why don't they use the same line? But I guess it could get cut with artillery or something like that. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. I guess one thing I should recall is when I was on Arsenal, one morning, bright and early, they called me and said, well, we have two guys down outside of the perimeter here. So I started out there towards them. Well, in fact, I went up to them. And when I got there, the guy said, well, do you realize where you are? And I said, well, what is it you're trying to tell me? And he says, you're in the middle of a minefield. That's what had got them, because they'd gotten out there and got knocked down when a mine tripped on them and actually blew out a huge chunk of one guy's leg and wounded the other one pretty bad. So what I did was call up one of the aides with me, and of course